Coming in at number 5, we have the strange tale of Betty and Barney Hill. In 1961, snowbirds Betty and Barney Hill were making their way back home after a vacation in good old Niagara Falls. Now, it's important to note, as is usually the case in these kinds of reports, that Betty and Barney Hill were both upstanding citizens, deemed normal by society and their wider community. In other words, they weren't old crazy people. As they made their way south of the border, the couple saw what appeared to be a falling star, but perplexingly, it began to move around the sky, appearing to grow larger in mass. Here's where Barney commits his first horror no-no. Instead of staying on course and driving away on the highway, he decided to drive slowly and follow the light along another road. Eventually, he got so close that the object hovered roughly 100 feet in the distance. Here's where Barney makes his second no-no. He got out of the car and he took a closer look. According to Mr. Hill, it was a strange craft with 8 to 10 humanoid-looking creatures dressed in black uniforms. Horrified, the pair got back in the car and sped away. However, when they frantically returned home, they realized that a trip that should have took them 3 hours mysteriously took them over 7. Did they just get lost on the detour, or did they end up having a little chat with their newfound friends? What do you think? Next up at number 4, the Gundia McKay abduction. This one is just plain weird. 3 different people were involved in this story and they all corroborate the exact same thing. On October the 4th, 2001, at a property in Gundia, Australia, 22-year-old Amy Rylance was abducted by a flying craft as she slept. Her husband Keith and their friend Petra both witnessed this event in action. According to Petra, she saw Amy being pulled out of the window by a strange, bewildering light after being alerted by the sound of shattering glass. The pair were completely perplexed and searched the property for Amy, but they could find her absolutely nowhere. After calling the police, Keith and Petra were initially suspected of foul play, believing that they'd killed Amy and made up a story just to get away with it. Bizarrely enough though, just an hour later, police received word of a woman who'd been found wandering lost on a remote highway in the city of Mackay, which is a 9-hour drive away. 9 hours. When they found Amy, she claimed that she'd been kept in a strange metal room by a 7-foot-tall, calm, ethereal being. Afterwards, she had strange triangular marks on her thigh, which were documented by police, and bizarrely enough, her body hair had grown excessively over a period of few hours. What the hell? What do you guys think? Swinging in at number 3, Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor was a forestry worker who lived in Livingston, Scotland. He was heading down into the woods one day, I think there's a song there, but he turned a corner and just like that, he saw a UFO parked in a field. All of a sudden, Robert said that 2 small, strange spheres were fired out of the object and they made a clattering sound as their spiky surface ploughed through the earth. They attached themselves to Robert, dragging him back towards the vessel. He said that he could smell a strong, sickening odour before he completely lost consciousness. What happened? Well, still no one knows, but when Robert awoke, he'd moved further down the field and his dog was there, barking wildly in panic. When he tried to calm his dog down, he noticed that his voice was gone and he felt incredibly weak with the inability to walk. He ended up crawling all the way back home, where he found his wife in tears. He looked terrible and he'd been gone for over a day. Police began an investigation, but still to this day have no explanation for the bizarre events that transpired. Spooky, eh? And coming in at number 2, the Manhattan abduction. Well, here we go again. It's a bold enough claim in itself. To claim that you were abducted by a UFO right out of the window of your Manhattan apartment, that takes it to a new level. Strangely enough though, the Manhattan abduction is one of the most well-documented abduction cases of all time. Originally aliased as Linda Corteil to protect her identity, this New York woman claimed that a beam of light drew her from her apartment window as a small girl, all the way to the top of the building and then into a strange metallic vessel. She was taken through a series of mysterious hallways until she was strapped to a table and subdued by tall humanoid creatures. Kind of sounds like the standard abduction shtick, right? Well, wrong, because this event was actually witnessed by 2 United Nations bodyguards who were stationed with a diplomat in a nearby building. They saw the whole thing, a little girl suspended by a beam of light taken into a strange metallic vessel. Well, even stranger, the 2 bodyguards would later go on to be afflicted by severe psychological maladies, some say as the result of their report. Kinda makes you think who or what was involved, eh? And finally, at number 1, the Allagash alien abductions. Now, this is my favourite, the absolute classic. A few guys in the deep woods, aliens slip them up in a tractor beam, they wake up in the morning with no recollection, probes, you get the picture. But in actuality, the Allagash abduction has a little bit more to it. In 1976, 4 friends in their early 20s went camping one weekend in rural Maine. They were Jack, Jim, Chuck, and Charlie, who kind of sound like something straight out of a Stephen King novel. On their second night out in the woods, they noticed a strange, incredibly bright light floating ominously on the horizon. On the third night, as they were night fishing, the light appeared again, so they decided to shine their flashlights right at it, when all of a sudden the light expanded and enveloped all 4 men. Lights out, they remember nothing. They woke up back at their campsite with no recollection of the events that had just transpired between them being in their boat and not being in their boat. The fire, which had been roaring just minutes before, burned down to nothing but embers. Well, after this strange occurrence, the men started to have similar nightmares of humanoid beings with long necks and large heads with large metallic eyes and insect-like fingers. They began drawing what they saw in their dreams, and after a while they connected the dots and realized they were having the exact same shared nightmare, remnants of consciousness left over from their reported abduction. So coherent was their shared story that experts began analysing the group, and although the results are undocumented, the 4 men were deemed mentally stable and they all passed lie detector tests about the event. Makes you wonder whether a clear, corroborated story is evidence enough for proof of the paranormal.
Number 5 on this list is Helen Sharman. Dr. Helen Sharman was the first ever British woman to go to space. She went in 1991 on a mission to the Soviet space station. Dr. Helen Sharman is extremely well educated, renowned in her community, and is one of the very few people in the history of humankind who's actually been to space. Therefore, I hold her opinion in extremely high regard when we're referring to something like extraterrestrial life. And her opinion is that said life is already here. Dr. Helen Sharman told The Observer's magazine that aliens exist. There's no two ways about it. There must be all sorts of different forms of life. She went on to say in her interview that it's possible they're here right now and we simply can't see them. Like I said earlier, this is an actual astronaut who's saying this right now. Someone who very clearly knows far more about this than your average Joe and whose opinion should be acknowledged. Now, just because one person believes that alien life could potentially be on Earth, well, that's far from fact. But oftentimes when we think about aliens and the potential of them being on our planet, it can easily get chalked up to some mumbo jumbo from people who aren't well researched or properly educated on the topic. That certainly can't be said about Helen Sharman, and I think that the fact that someone of this background is openly coming out and giving this opinion shows that the culture surrounding aliens is changing. I think that as time goes on, we'll see a lot more individuals like Helen come out and express this opinion, further adding to the validity of alien life living among us. Number 4 on this list is Oumuamua. Oumuamua was first discovered on October 19th in 2017, and it holds the title as being the very first discovered interstellar object to visit our solar system. Now, even though this object isn't necessarily evidence of aliens being here on Earth, a lot of people look to it as evidence of aliens' existence as a whole. The biggest name on this list of alien believers being Avi Loeb. Avi is a Harvard professor for astrophysics and has made it known that he doesn't think this object entering our solar system is your typical comet or asteroid. He's come out and said that this object is actually an alien probe sent to search for other life in the universe. In fact, he wrote, Oumuamua may be a fully operational probe sent intentionally to Earth's vicinity by an alien civilization. One of the biggest reasons he thinks this and others believe it is due to this object's strange movement. The speed at which this object is flying doesn't seem to fit in with our current laws of physics. The object is simply moving too fast for the gravitational pull that we believe to be acting upon it. It's also flipping and maneuvering itself in a way that doesn't seem to make any sense. Now, this thing is wildly far away, so even though we can get a rough estimate of how big it is, and it certainly is very sizable, it's hard to know for sure exactly what this thing is. He has faced some backlash in the scientific community for his claims, but then again, everybody who comes out and talks about aliens typically does. All we know for sure about this thing is that it came from a completely different solar system and seems to be accelerating in speed, which doesn't make any sense to anyone. I don't want to wholeheartedly jump on the alien train simply because of this logic, but I also don't think that immediately writing off a Harvard astrophysics professor is the smart thing to do either. Number 3 on this list is alien bacteria. One of the biggest knocks against any argument associated with aliens is that our solar system hasn't shown any signs of life except for Earth. This isn't necessarily true though, based on a recent study that has come out in regards to Venus. Venus is one heck of a planet and certainly not somewhere that I would want to live. The storms are mighty, the temperature is way too hot, and acid regularly rains down from the sky. Not the ideal location if you ask me. One thing that Venus is also home to is a rare poisonous gas, phosphine. Now you're probably thinking, well, how would a poisonous gas indicate any signs of alien life? Wouldn't it indicate the opposite? And in most cases you might be right. However, phosphine is almost always linked to the presence of life. On Earth, phosphine is produced by microorganisms as they digest organic matter. This is why we consider it to be a biosignature and an indicator of life. Venus is certainly different from Earth, and we can't simply apply what makes sense here to Venus without asking some questions. However, this is a strong indicator from scientists that life is certainly possible from Venus. We've also seen before that Mars might contain some life. These two planets may not house the typical alien life that you may picture in your brain, but a bacteria from Venus or Mars is just as alien as somebody flying down in a UFO. Is it not possible that somehow, through our extensive history, debris from Venus or debris from Mars landed on Earth and developed life here? Maybe we never even realized that this life was alien to begin with. Number 2 on this list is microorganisms. We just talked about how Venus could be the host to life, bacteria or other small organisms that we've yet to identify. Well, one of the biggest arguments against aliens living among us is that we haven't seen them yet. Sure, there have been some stories here and there, but nothing on a major and global scale. What if we aren't looking properly though? What if our understanding of life doesn't match with what an alien life form is? Scientists have thought deeply about this possibility and what this could mean. This life, seeing as it would not compute with our definition of life, would actually live in what experts refer to as a shadow biosphere. Now, this shadow biosphere isn't some alternate dimension or ghost realm, but it's a biosphere with organisms that have a completely different biochemistry than we're familiar with. We're made up of carbon and nitrogen, but why are we automatically assuming that an alien would be made up of this as well? It could be just as likely that alien beings are made up of other elements. If this was the case, then it's most likely on a microscopic scale, and that's why we haven't been able to recognize them yet. We currently have a very limited way of studying microbes, and we need to be testing for a very specific microbe to know what it is. If we aren't searching for the proper microbe though, then it's very likely we could miss it. A lot of scientists have gotten on board with this shadow biosphere train and talked about its legitimacy. Once again, this isn't damning proof that there are aliens out there, but it does mean that there isn't damning proof against them either. Just because we don't see alien life, it doesn't mean that it's not here. Number 1 on this list is the 2004 UFO sightings. Now, I just used this point in a previous video called Top 5 Scary Discoveries the Government Doesn't Want You to Know About, and I do hate reusing the same point, but it just has to be included in this video as well. For those who aren't aware, the 2004 UFO sightings happened very close to San Diego by the United States Navy. These sightings were by multiple people and even caught on video. Just like in our last top 5 video, I want to play some of the footage so you guys can see what I'm referring to here. Those videos were caught by the US Navy and weren't released to the public until years after it happened. As you can see in those clips, the UFO that is flying through the sky doesn't look like anything man-made at all. The way it moves through the air is unlike anything we've been able to build. For instance, one of the Navy officers reported seeing it cruise at 60,000 feet and then immediately dropping to only 50 feet above the sea. It did this without making a sonic boom and did it almost instantly. That defies our current understanding of flying objects and leads a lot of people to believe this was from another intelligent species. Now, no one is sure if this object was being piloted by some sort of alien or if it was an alien probe operating by itself. I should also note that a UFO sighting isn't undeniable proof of alien life. It might just be something that we don't understand. However, the way that it flies through space has got to make us wonder. If something is flying through our air like that and it's that advanced, is it possible that something like that could have landed without us knowing? I think that might be a fair assumption. And if that's possible, then is it also possible that some sort of alien creature got out of said object and is now living among us? frankly, I think that's also a fair assumption too. We obviously don't know for sure, but I think that this footage is some of the clearest proof that aliens living among us might be a reality. Number 5 on this list is the wow signal. The wow signal is a sound that an astronomer received many years ago that, as of right now, is probably the closest thing we've ever gotten to alien contact. Now, I do want to say that just because we got this signal doesn't mean that they're living among us. However, it does give a strong indication that they're out there in the first place, which is frankly half the battle. Intelligencer writes, in 1977, Ohio State's Big Ear Radio telescope intercepted a 72-second burst of sound that bore signs of having come from interstellar space, which could be a sign of extraterrestrial communication. The anomaly measured 1,420 megahertz, a frequency in the water hole, the term for a radio emission range thought ideal for intergalactic messages because it's unusually quiet. Jerry Amon, the astronomer who spotted it, was so excited that he scribbled a giant wow on his printout. Astronomers' explanations for the bizarre phenomenon include secret spy satellites and a passing comet nobody knew about in 1977. But many admit nothing explains it adequately, and even if the signal doesn't prove aliens exist, it's still a tug on the cosmic fishing line. To date, it remains the best evidence of alien communication ever obtained. So wow is right in this case. To receive something like that is a very strong indication that not only is there life out in the universe, but it's also intelligent life. At least intelligent enough to be operating sound systems powerful enough to emit such a frequency in the first place. Again, it's not proof that they're assuredly here on Earth, but it's a good start for sure. Number 4 on this list is habitable planets. Scientists are currently finding more and more planets that are in what is called the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is the area from a star that is not too cold and also not too hot, so it should be able to support life from how we've come to understand it. As science learns more and more about these planets, there have been a few that have surfaced that scientists are particularly bullish about. Proxima b, TRAPPIST-1 system, LHS-114-OB, Ross-128b, GJ-121-4b. Now, those probably mean absolutely nothing to you at all, but those are all the planets that have been discovered to be in the Goldilocks zone and could support life. They are also all the planets that people have reported scientists not wanting to talk about. There's a bit of a conspiracy theory going on right now that scientists have actually discovered proof of alien life in these locations, but are hiding it from the public so as to not start a mass chaos. Now, this is all speculation, but why else would these scientists want to hide information about planets that are apparently in the perfect spot to harbor life? Hard to say for sure, but aliens are definitely a possibility. Number 3 on this list is the numbers game. The universe has widely been believed to be infinite. That means it's really freaking big. If the universe is infinite, then it only makes sense that there would be at least some place out there that has other life. That, my friends, is basically the numbers game. BBC writes, most scientists agree that alien life almost certainly exists in the universe somewhere. Our galaxy contains in the region of 300 billion stars, and we're now discovering planets traveling around these stars. The more we look and the more technology we put out there, the more of these exoplanets we find. To date, we've detected around 4,000, and that's just in our galaxy. If we look at the universe as a whole, then there are approximately 200 billion galaxies. Why would life just occur here? We're pretty convinced it's out there, says space scientist Maggie Adarin-Pocock. It is purely a numbers game, it is a probability. So this argument makes a lot of sense to me, guys. 200 billion galaxies, that is a lot of galaxies and a lot of stars in those galaxies, and basically just a lot of chances to have life appear. Now, this life doesn't necessarily need to be living among us. It could be out in the universe waiting to be found, but similar to our wow signal example, this is a great start. It's widely believed in the scientific community that there is life out there, and who knows, maybe it's here too. Number 2 on this list is the billionaires. Now, this is going to be a bit of a fallacy because I'm going to appeal to authority with this one. Basically, I'm going to say that there are a bunch of smart, powerful and rich people out there who believe in the existence and presence of aliens, and therefore we should too. Now, I understand that this is a fallacy and not concrete evidence, but I do believe that acknowledging these people's opinions and at least questioning why they might be thinking this way, well, that's important. Let's name off a few people who are currently obsessed with space travel and contacting aliens. Robert Bigelow, Elon Musk, Paul Allen, Yuri Milner, Jeff Bezos, Franklin Antonio. What do these gentlemen have in common? Well, they are all super rich and they are all fascinated with space and aliens. Now, this isn't proof of anything. This isn't evidence that says aliens are among us, but I do think that it's a sign. If I saw these men all investing in the same stock, then I would also invest in that same stock. If I saw all of these men looking at the same thing, and in this case aliens and space travel, and throwing billions of dollars at it, then I'd wonder to myself, why are they doing that? Well, they're probably doing that because they seem to think that aliens are in fact real and potentially are among us. I can comfortably acknowledge that every single one of those people that I listed is more intelligent than I am, and if every one of them are deeply invested in aliens, then I think that's a sign maybe we should be as well. And finally, number 1 on this list is the encounters. Sometimes we think of encounters with aliens as being few and far between, or that those who have had encounters with said aliens are off their rocker or aren't being truthful. Based on the amount of encounters that we've had and the individuals or groups involved in said encounters, both of those assumptions are categorically false. The fact of the matter is that there have been hundreds, thousands of encounters that humans have had with potential alien life throughout the years. Detailed accounts of everything that went down. Stuff that doesn't seem likely for someone to make up. Whether it be Barney and Betty Hill's abduction, Antonio Villas-Boas, the Foo Fighters, the Kecksburg UFO crash, Kenneth Arnold's incident, the Phoenix Lights, or any of the other many notable encounters that have happened in the past, no one can deny that people have been seeing aliens for quite a while. So picking an encounter at random, let's talk about the Travis Walton abduction. This is just another one of the many encounters that hit the big news after it happened. Intelligencer says, in 1975, a team of loggers claimed their 22-year-old co-worker, Travis Walton, disappeared for 5 days after a glowing disc in the Arizona woods zapped him with a bluish ray. Intrigued, he'd reportedly wandered underneath the hovering object and it abducted him. He claims he awoke on a table in a sterile-looking room surrounded by 3 well-developed fetuses wearing tan robes. He tried to flee, passed out, then regained consciousness only once the aliens had ditched him on the Arizona roadside. The news blew up when Walton was finally found. Apparently, him and the group of guys passed lie detector tests, and Walton himself was taken to a hypnotist to try and see if he was lying, which he wasn't. So in this case, it's clear Walton at least wholeheartedly believes he's telling the truth. Also, if he wasn't telling the truth, or that's not what happened to him, then where the heck was he for 5 entire days? A guy just vanished off of the face of the planet for 5 days and is found walking along the roadside in Arizona later? Like, that doesn't just happen, folks. Due to the extensive amount of encounters and the detail to which the stories are described, how can we say without a doubt that aliens aren't living among us? I'll answer that for you. We can't. Number 5 on this list is the Navy UFOs. This is one of the most famous alien or UFO encounters the humans have had in the last few decades. Reader's Digest says, when it comes to extraterrestrial life and making contact with those from outer space, everyone has an opinion. Some think it's all a hack, some are open to speculate, and others still are entirely taken with the tales and stories as old as time, cameras poised and tinfoil hats at the ready. UFOs have fascinated and confused us for years as each new flying saucer or hovercraft sighting makes national news and splits us into 2 camps. While it's easy to debunk individual stories, it's way harder to argue with the US Department of Defense. In videos leaked back in 2007 and 2017, the Pentagon has aimed to clear up any misconceptions by the public on whether or not the footage that has been circulating was real. In the video, unidentified objects are seen spinning and hovering in the air and above the water, while two Navy pilots remark in shock and confusion over the two oblong disc-shaped objects. So you may be thinking, well, how did the government try to hide it if they were the ones that actually released it? Well, they did release it themselves, but we have to remember that that was only after the videos had been leaked. In 2007 and 2017, these videos had made their way to the public without the government stamp of approval. So everyone was freaking out and speculating on what the heck this thing could be and why we hadn't heard anything about it. What the heck it is, I don't know, but why we hadn't heard about it is because the government had chosen not to tell us. The only reason that they inevitably released the videos is because they got their hand caught in the cookie jar. They were found out. They were exposed when these videos were leaked. At that point, they could either continue to vehemently deny something that was clearly pointing towards naval activity, or they could fess up and release it themselves in hopes of taking less public backlash. They opted to do the second one because, in their words, they wanted to clear up any misconceptions by the public. That, however, is code for we got caught and we think that releasing it now would be better for us in the long run. If it was up to them though, these never would have seen the light of day, which then makes you wonder how many other videos like this are out there that you and me, we just don't know about. Number 4 on this list is the O'Hare incident. Chicago's O'Hare International Airport had quite the interesting experience back in 2006. Reader's Digest says, on November 7th, 2006, United Flight 446 was about to depart from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport when a dozen United Airline employees spotted an odd metallic craft hovering over the gate. The employees reported that it hung in the air for several minutes before finally shooting up at breakneck speed into the clouds. The strangest part? The UFO did not register on the airport's radar despite all the witnesses. The FAA declined to investigate, chalking it up to a weather phenomenon. A weather phenomenon. Seriously? Yeah. Alright there, guys. Also, for those who don't know, the FAA stands for the Federal Aviation Administration, and they're a government-run agency that deals with pretty much anything that flies. So don't get it twisted, guys. This was definitely the government deciding that they didn't want to do anything with this incident, or at the very least, they didn't want the public to know about it. But you'd think that they could come up with a better excuse than a weather incident, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I've ever seen a weather incident cause odd metallic things to hover in the sky. Number 3 on this list is the 7 strange crafts. So this one is really interesting because the government did address it, but they definitely didn't chalk it up to being what a lot of people thought it was in Aliens. Reader's Digest says a 1952 incident where 7 unidentified objects appeared over secure airspace near the Pentagon was captured on film. The crafts were registered on radar and jets were immediately sent to investigate these suspicious strange crafts. However, when the American jets approached that airspace, those 7 objects disappeared from the radar. When the jets landed, the objects returned to the radar screen once more. President Harry S. Truman was notified, and Air Force Intelligence Director General Sanford held a press conference saying that there were reports made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It's this group of observations that we're attempting to resolve, but there was no resolution. So we kind of just heard from the government that they were on it, but then didn't really hear anything after that. There was no resolution, or at least there wasn't one that was released to the public. Could I believe that they did actually discover something here, and they just decided that telling the public wouldn't be the best course of action? Absolutely I could. In fact, I almost guarantee it. I highly doubt that the American government would have seen this stuff and then after one pass with the jets just been like, well, alright, guess nothing's there, and then call it quits. No, they definitely would have kept investigating and looking until they discovered something. Telling the public about that though, probably wasn't in the cards. Number 2 on this list is the Richard French incident. So this is definitely one of the bigger cover-ups in UFO government history. Reader's Digest says in the 1950s it was Lieutenant Colonel Richard French's job to explain away UFO phenomena for the government. There was only one problem. Lieutenant Colonel French actually saw alien ships with his own eyes, reports the Daily Mail. At a citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013, the then 83-year-old man told the truth for the first time about what he saw as a young man in the waters of St. John's, Newfoundland, 2 UFOs that had crashed and sunk in the water, and aliens trying to fix them. They succeeded and took off. He didn't mention UFOs in his report at the time. How's that for a freaky government cover-up? Yeah, so that's about as government cover-up as we can get, guys. My guy legit says UFOs saw aliens and specifically omitted it to save face and not panic the public. I guess the guilt and also just the whole story had been eating away at him for decades though, and eventually he had to come clean and tell the public. Too little too late though with a story like this, because we never got an opportunity to investigate these aliens or talk to them or anything. Or at least, that's if he's telling the truth. For all we know, he's still leaving some parts of the story out. Only the government and Richard really know what happened. And number 1 on this list is the unexpected visitor. A man named Rick Porcels who lived in Texas got a very unexpected and unwanted visitor late one evening at his home. The story goes like this. In 2008, an unfathomably large aircraft hovered above Stevensville, Texas. Many people in the community saw it, and according to the Mutual UFO Network, a pilot named Stephen Allen reported that the unusual aircraft was flying at an estimated 3,000 miles per hour and was being chased by fighter jets. Then, a man named Rick Sorrells said he saw the same thing while hunting. Later, Sorrells says a strange man knocked on his door and said, "Son, we have the same caliber weapons you have, but we have more of them. You need to shut your mouth about what you saw." Can you imagine getting a knock on your door and it being the government basically telling you that if you say anything, you're gonna die? Yeah, that is definitely an unexpected and unwanted visitor if you ask me. So not only were they threatening citizens, I also didn't hear any reports from the government about that jet that was flying behind the UFO. You'd think that if a jet fighter were deployed to chase down an enemy aircraft in friendly airspace, the public should probably know about it to stay safe. But nope. Absolutely nothing. Total radio silence from the government. How many other times have they gone to someone's house and threatened them like this that we don't know about? How many people have been intimidated by the government to stay silent? Really scary question that, honestly, we might not even want to know the answer to.
Number 5, Al Worden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Worden was the module pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar mission in 1971. One of the 24 people who have flown to the moon. Woohoo! He's got a couple of firsts though. He orbited it 74 times in the command module. He was the first to drive a moon car. After Apollo 15 reached lunar orbit and his crewmates departed, and Worden spent 3 days alone in his module. That's terrifying. Traveling the furthest out from any other human. After he returned, the crew and him became involved in a NASA controversy, however. Not over leaked alien info, but over postage stamps they had taken to the moon. Yeah, big no-no apparently. They were reprimanded by NASA and did not fly in space again. Worden remained at NASA until 1975, then entered a private sector. And then it gets weird. On a British television morning show, Al Worden started talking about some interesting stuff. They asked him, "Why should we keep going back to the moon?" He paused and replied, "Survival. Survival of our species." Worden also rejected the notion that humans could colonize planets within our solar system, calling them unsustainable. Then he claims he knows where to find habitable planets. When pressed on aliens if he believes them or not, he said, "Yes. You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Yeah, we are the aliens though. We just think there's somebody else. But we were the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in their little spaceship and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. They'll tell you right up front." End quote. Okay, when you hear an astronaut say that, kinda jarring. Number 4, Roswell. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button. Birth of the UAP phenomenon. 1945, the US's first nuclear explosion. 1946, first underwater nuclear explosion. 1947, the first crash flying saucer. Coincidence? I think not. Especially since they've been known to hover around nuclear bases. Probably for the better. Humans are kind of the worst. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property, apparently harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them, of course, to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night. And the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! Photographs of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement, and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon. Can you believe that, huh? AKA the birth of a conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here. Number 3, Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a U.S. Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, a ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies the UFO phenomenon. I don't think there's a degree you can get that in. If so, I'm signing up. What school? What school, sorry? He was the lunar module pilot of the Apollo 14 in 1971 and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Yeah, he was walking while Worden was up there drifting in the currents of space. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions and that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s belonging to other planets. Thousands. Dateline NBC conducted an interview with Mitchell in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who claimed that they had met extraterrestrials in person. Quote, "The evidence for alien contact was very strong and classified by governments, who were covering up visitations and existence of alien bodies in places such as Roswell, New Mexico." Mitchell's book, The Way of the Explorer, discusses his journey. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that the US government was studying alien bodies and that this group had specifically stopped briefing US presidents since the 1960s. He said, quote, "We all know that UFOs are real. Now, the question is, where do they come from?" In 2008, Mitchell then was interviewed and claimed that Roswell crash was in fact the aliens that had contacted humans several times, but that the government had hidden the truth for more than 60 years. Scary stuff, scary stuff. He sadly passed in 2016. If we just reread the credentials alone, just one more time. Number 2, James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew in both the Gemini and Apollo programs. After graduating first in his class with a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering, he qualified as a test pilot at the Air Force. In 1962, McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission. In 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth. Over Hawaii, a craft of some sort. The UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Here's what Major James McDivitt said. "I was flying with Ed White. He was sleeping at the time, so I don't have anybody to verify this story, but we were drifting in space when suddenly an object appeared in the window. It's a cylindrical object, white. It had a long arm that stuck out of the side. The film was sent back to NASA and reviewed by some NASA film technicians. One of them selected what he thought was what they were talking about, at least before I had the chance to review it, and it was not the picture. It was a picture of a sun reflection on the window." So what were the pictures that he was talking about? In 1975, McDivitt said, "I never made a big deal out of it. It was something I definitely couldn't identify. It looked like a beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, I would eventually give up on that too if those were my credentials and people were like, yeah, right, James." When somebody has like 25 years of designing and flying space shuttles around, when they say, "Hey guys, I'm seeing something up here," it's not like, "Oh, James, clean those old specs, would you? Yuck, yuck." Houston, we have a problem. And number 1, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, US Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, the first human space program in the United States. You know the pictures. It looks like they're wearing a tinfoil suit, you know? Old school, old school. After service as a fighter pilot in World War II, He qualified as a test pilot in 1956 and then was selected as an astronaut in 1959. In 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first person to sleep in space, and the last American launched on a solo orbit mission. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, co-authored by Bruce Henderson, he recounted his experiences with the Air Force and NASA and an alleged UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to have seen his first UFO while flying over Germany, then saw them land in a dry lake bed. Cooper claimed up until his death that the US was indeed covering up UFOs. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by his fellow pilots, many coming from the military pilots on radar. In his memoirs, Cooper wrote that he had seen unexplained aircrafts tons in his career, and that in 1978 he actually testified before the United Nations on the topic. He sadly passed in 2004. He was such a strong advocate for disclosure, and all of these astronauts are remembered as putting their neck and name out on the line for some truth. But I mean, those UFO enthusiasts, huh? They're all wackos, right? Right? Number 5, Leland Melvin. American engineer and now retired NASA astronaut Leland Melvin has spent hundreds of hours in space. Literally hundreds. Leland holds 4 honorary doctorates for his service in education, the sciences, and philanthropy. Doctorates. I'm just saying that before the comments start rolling in saying he's just another wacko. He's crazy. They're not wackos, people. Any of them. They've been screened so many times by so many people with so many tests, they have to be damn well near perfect before going up on or in NASA's budget. Before his career with NASA, Leland was actually All-American for football. Detroit Lions, Toronto Argos. Guy made the NFL and then said, you know what? I think I'm gonna be an astronaut. Like, give this guy a Netflix movie, would ya? He was selected by NASA in 1998 after getting injured with a football career. Guy goes from the turf to working at NASA Langley Center. This guy's put in time, both down here and up there. Mission after mission with NASA. He's got quite the practice at the whole floating around thing. When Leland was pressed about otherworldly visitors and his ideas about the cosmos, he said this when he was working up in orbit. He had seen something translucent, curved and organic looking when he was working with fellow astronaut Randy Bresnik. The pair of them, again, called down to NASA to ask what it could be. NASA's official response was, probably ice. Yeah, nice and specific there, Houston. Thank you for that. When has NASA ever said probably? Melvin dismissed this and figured it was NASA's explanation to just cover it up. Like, who's more qualified here? That's all I'm asking. When the most qualified people are like, yeah, I can't tell if that's frozen water or a full-on mothership, Houston. Either they shouldn't be up there at all, or we need some more Windex on those windows there, NASA. Huh? Number 4, Ivan Wagner. As always, if you dig what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button or comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Have you ever seen a UFO out there? Yeah, you. Have you seen one? Comment down below with some details about your experiences. I know I have. Twice now. Hence the obsession with all this stuff. Those Reddit rabbit holes, boy oh boy. Speaking of falling into a wormhole of conspiracy and who said what, astronaut Ivan Wagner, or I should say cosmonaut Ivan Wagner, since he's Russian by birth, and although he's bunking up with some roomies up there in the ISS, he was on the ISS as a first timer just back in 2020. Does NASA initiate rookies up there? Like pull pranks on the newbies? Like no gravity, just unbuckle you while you sleep, flow you out, you know? He and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin were working up there alongside Chris Cassidy, the American commander of said expedition. When Wagner was orbiting the Earth, he might have captured some footage of UFOs, better known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. It's the jargon nowadays. The aurora lights behind Earth's beautiful curves was being recorded from the ISS when he saw a string of really weird lights moving in a really weird way. He labeled the video Space Guests. Wagner tweeted the vid, which apparently shows the aurora australis near Antarctica, and then all of a sudden this blob of organized lights just cruises on over the globe. Looks like a blob of like glitter just trucking across space. Like, what is that? Of course NASA didn't follow up. Like, what are they gonna say? Oh yeah, those are stars that move and blink, I think. I mean, no? Space junk. Yeah, space debris and swamps and things. Also, what a lame excuse. Space junk? Okay, so you're saying there's lots of litter up there? That's what you're saying? That's what just zipped over my house silently, defying gravity and lasered up my cow? Yeah, I don't think so, NASA. Number 3, Chris Hadfield. Retired Canadian astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot, and musician. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hadfield flew 2 missions and also served as commander on the International Space Station. Before his career as an astronaut, he served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 25 years as an air commander fighter pilot. So he has the credentials to say the least. In 1992, Hadfield was accepted into the Canadian astronaut program. He first flew in space in 1995, and since then, he says he's seen tons of stuff up there just zipping around that even a man with all those credentials says he can't explain. Quote, "I've seen countless things in the sky, but he has a pretty cool take on it. He doesn't keep it on the DL, he doesn't boast, and he doesn't panic. Seems like Chris has the mentality like, quote, to see something in the sky that you don't understand and then to immediately conclude it's intelligent life from another solar system is the height of foolishness and lack of logic. However, Chris seems to have a little dirt on Mars that maybe we all don't. He said, I think the fundamental question is that Mars was a lot like Earth 4 billion years ago when life first formed. So if it happened here, did it happen there? It would be evident somewhere in the geologic records. All we need is one fossil for proof. He thinks there could be potentially alien life in the clouds of Venus or on the distant moons of one of our gas giants. Researchers have suggested that there could be microbial life in the clouds of Venus because of the presence of ammonia, which on Earth is a key indicator of aquatic life. Aquatic life, eh? Atlanteans? Hadfield on the UAP phenomenon, quote, "We have 7 people living up there. We've been sending people to space since I was born. I spent half a year off planet looking everywhere. It makes no sense at all that intelligent life somewhere from not our solar system could cross interstellar space and just sneak around and only be caught on some strange video by fighter pilots. It just doesn't pass any basic sniff test or logic. It's fun, it's exciting, but if you use reason, the whole argument falls apart." End quote. Okay, Chris Hadfield, keep your secrets from now, you polite Canadian you. Wait till people start looking into Paul Hellyer, another very polite Canadian with some secrets of his own. Until then, you keep distracting us up there with that guitar, Chris. I see you, Jake Sully. Number 2, Michael Collins. NASA veteran and the very first driver up there, Mr. Michael Collins himself served as command module pilot on the historic Apollo 11 mission in 1969. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon for the very first time, saying those very first famous lines we all know so well, Collins was back parking that thing up there. Mr. Collins stayed up there by himself in lunar orbit waiting for the safe return of his crewmates. I can't even stay in a basement with the lights off by myself. Imagine being up there just drifting in the currents of matter, like being in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, no way, dude. The astronaut retired from NASA in 1970 and spent his free time answering questions on Twitter. Apparently, he has gotten some really interesting buzz. Mr. Collins invited the interweb to chat, saying, quote, "Are we alone? Hashtag Ask Michael Collins." And boy oh boy, did he get some responses. Everything from wackos who like aliens to very, very high-ranked generals and pilots who are apparently also wackos who like aliens for talking about this. Collins, quote, "I used to think that NASA sent me to the wrong place, to the moon, because I think Mars is a much more interesting place," end quote. Collins has talked about it in the past about the possibility of alien life existing beyond Earth and doesn't shy away from discussing the topic in full. In 1999, for instance, he even argued on the topic of life developing in other parts of this infinite cosmos. So maybe it has then. He wrote in his book saying, quote, "I am alone now. Truly alone, and absolutely isolated from any known life. Although I may feel like I'm the same person, I also feel that I am different from other people. I have been places and done things you simply would not believe." Collins circled the moon once every 2 hours. What's scarier, walking on an unknown rock that apparently no one's ever visited, or flying all the way around it by yourself in the pitch black with no communications? Collins achieved the rank of Major General. He left NASA in 1970 to join the State Department and later became director of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington. One of the most key players in this whole thing. Michael Collins sadly passed in 2021. Number 1, Buzz Aldrin. Of course, the poster child for the whole phenomenon itself, Mr. Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr. American astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot with a doctorate of science and astronautics. This guy is overqualified, okay? 3 spacewalks in 1966, Gemini 12 mission in 1969, Apollo 11 mission. He and mission commander Neil Armstrong were the first 2 people to land on the moon. Quote, "There was something out there, close enough to be observed. What could it be?" According to Aldrin, on Apollo 11 to the moon, quote, "I observed a light out the window that appeared to be moving alongside us. What could that have been other than a spacecraft from another country or another world? It was either the rocket that had separated from us or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander, right?" After he returned from his missions, he was convinced he saw aliens while he was out there. Credentials aside, he took a lie detector test, people, which he passed with flying colors. In an interview with C-SPAN Buzz, he talked about the future potential of Earth's moon for humanity. He added a little extra info that might have gained the spark to go back, regarding a certain monolith on a moon. Quote, "Visit the moon Phobos of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato object that goes around Mars once in every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're gonna say, who put that there? And you bet, Buzz, I'll be the first one to ask that."
Number 5, the story of Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell is a storied man. He's part of an incredibly exclusive club out of 12 other people who can claim that they have seen the Earth standing on the surface of the moon. I assume they all have a group chat together. He's best known for typing 80 lines of code to save the Apollo 14 mission as it descended to the moon in 1971. He was the 6th man to ever walk on the moon, and he is a devout believer in aliens being out there. He insists that he knows that top government and military officials were hiding the truth behind aliens in New Mexico. He said it was a known secret that alien spacecraft were responsible for disabling nuclear missiles and shooting them down, supposing that aliens are directly involved in intervention to prevent us from destroying the planet. Which, if that's the case, I've got nothing but thanks to give for our extraterrestrial friends. Thanks for that, we're not that responsible. He goes on to insist that the Roswell incident was real, and the government had covered it up and buried it as a conspiracy theory to deter people from finding out the real truth, which he believes NASA thinks the public simply wouldn't be able to handle. In 2004, he told a Floridan newspaper that he knew of a secret cabal inside the American government that was responsible for studying alien bodies, and that after JFK, this group no longer answered to the president and didn't include the commander-in-chief in their briefings. Mr. Mitchell is quoted as saying, "They all know that UFOs are real. The question is, where are they coming from?" Now, NASA didn't quite have the same tune. NASA themselves obviously denied all of Mitchell's statements, saying that Edgar Mitchell is a great American, but we don't share his opinions on this issue. Well, of course. If you've been sitting on a secret for 60 years, you're not gonna fold over one guy, but a bunch of evidence? Well, maybe. Number 4, Luis Elizondo. Luis Elizondo is one of the most outspoken believers in aliens and UAPs out there today, alongside Tom DeLonge, championing that he believes firmly that NASA and the Pentagon aren't telling us all the whole truth. And he would know, as Elizondo formerly led a research team to research potential UFOs. Although the project was disbanded, Elizondo never gave up his mission, believing it to be his personal calling to expose the truth. He's been quoted many times saying, "My personal belief is there's very compelling evidence that we are not alone." He served on the Department of Defense and resigned in 2012 over excessive secrecy surrounding the UAP program. These aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the US inventory, nor in any foreign inventory that we are aware of, Elizondo said of the objects they researched in his time there. He added that the program was founded to analyze unexplained aerial phenomena and ascertain whether or not that what they were seeing is a threat to national security or not. Kind of unnervingly, when asked about that, he said, "We found a lot. We identified anomalous aircraft that are seemingly defying the laws of aerodynamics." Which, oh hey, coming from the mouth of someone who worked at the Pentagon, that seems just a little bit suspicious, right? Right? Not just me? The quote continues, "Things that don't have any obvious flight surfaces, any obvious forms of propulsion, and maneuvering in ways that include extreme maneuverability beyond, I would submit, the healthy G-forces of a human or anything biological." Elizondo's gone so far in the past as to suggest that he thinks the US government has fragments of UFOs or UAPs somewhere, reverse engineering it to learn all their secrets. Sounds extremely like someone higher up didn't want people finding out about whatever Elizondo was getting onto. And why not? Number 3, the signal. Now, when it comes to aliens, we all kind of assume in the back of our heads that our first direct contact with them is going to be very up close and personal. That they'll come down and hopefully we'll see them face to face or face to mandible, or perhaps we'll see their ships descending on us and it's already too late. But what if our first contact was something else? A radar signal, a noise through the silence of space. In 2003, astronomers working for the SETI, short for the Search for Extra Intelligence, a project dedicated to hunting for extraterrestrial life, were using a massive telescope to look to the stars. Now, nothing much came of it except for a series of unexplained radio signals from the skies. These signals all disappeared over time except one, which was growing stronger and stronger. The signal comes from somewhere between the constellation of Pisces and Aries, and curiously, the signal is at a frequency that absorbs and emits energy. Naturally, the researchers found this a bit interesting. Some of the astronomers believe that this could be a frequency that extraterrestrials are using to try and get our attention, like an intergalactic "you up" text. While it could very well have turned out to just be totally nothing or some sort of natural explanation that I'm not nearly smart enough to understand, I'm gonna err on the side of extraterrestrials. But we have to wonder what the signal was, right? I mean, we have to admit that's a bit suspicious, that there's something worth looking into there. Now, this story is from 2003 and I had trouble finding an update on it. But who knows? Whatever was broadcasting that could still be out there. Number 2, Blue Book. Now, I think we all kind of secretly suspect that some of our tax dollars are going to research aliens. I mean, what else are they doing all day? Well, in one form or another, government agencies have always been researching UFOs and UAPs. Since 1949 to 1969, Project Blue Book was the code name for a secret government research division dedicated to analyzing UAP technology, analyzing whether or not UAPs on record were threats to air and national securities, and just what any of this stuff in the sky was. It was basically the closest thing we had to a real-life X-Files department, as far as we know. I mean, there could be an even more secret one. Surely with all that government money, they must have found something special, right? Well, if you'd like to feel like Agent Mulder yourself, you can scroll through 130,000 pages of declassified documents from UFO specialist John Greenwald, who made it all available for free online. He's a defender of free information. Greenwald says secrets are not bad things. I think we should know about this and it should be in the history books. John, I completely agree. All this stuff about cover-ups, we can totally handle finding out aliens are real, okay? You know, we're big now, we're responsible, we learned about Santa, we can do this. A couple years ago, we experienced a wave where there were clowns hanging out on the street corner of like every rural street in North America. We got over that. We all saw Tiger King together. Aliens won't even be that weird, I don't think. Now, Project Blue Book was officially disbanded because according to a joint review, nothing significant ever came from it. Now, since then, it was thought that no government agency was looking into UAP research at all, except until the UAP document quietly dropped this year, you know, sneaking it under the door that NASA and the Air Force had been researching aliens and possible sightings this whole time under everybody's nose, and they leaked a bunch of documents and footage, and you should look it up after this video because I'm not joking, it's totally real. It seems just like us, NASA can't rest until they find the truth out there. Number 1, new developments. We are probably coming to one of the most exciting times in UAP history, as after the UAP report came out, there is probably more legitimacy towards the discussion around the serious existence of extraterrestrial life now more than ever. As of October 2022, NASA is pretty much coming clean and opening a new study into the research of UAP and extraterrestrial life. 16 hand-picked specialists have been selected to analyze former data and determine how to go forward observing future events. Now, the study is less focused on whether or not previous sightings are confirmed UAPs, since it's kind of hard to ascertain with missing data. So it's more focused on what observations will be needed to understand UAP sightings going forward. The team is going to include researchers and key personnel from all divisions, all walks of life, notably including former astronaut Scott Kelly, who formerly served as a pilot for the Space Shuttle Discovery, and also once held the world record for most days in space, so he probably knows a thing or two about objects floating in the stars. Now, Kelly himself doesn't personally believe aliens have been to Earth yet, saying, "I think there's life in the universe. Hopefully intelligent life, but I don't think they visit planet Earth." So there's some skeptics on the team, but hey, at least they're finally coming out to get to brass tacks on this thing. Officially, openly, the government is talking with us about studying this phenomena. This is amazing. Now, you know how scientists are. They gotta have some numbers on a paper before they'll believe it. An associate administrator at NASA, Thomas Zerbchin, said, "Data is the language of scientists and makes the unexplainable explainable. Exploring the unknown of space and the atmosphere is at the heart of who we are at NASA. This is maybe the most exciting time in history to be a UAP fan."